Buddy, we're going to get started with this. I'm going to have to jump off at about just before 8 o'clock because I've got to get in another webinar. So Gary, I'm going to have you take over from that point and just continue it with the question and answer sessions. But I would like to welcome all of the delegates and appreciate how much you guys are, the time and effort you're putting in. And we don't hold these type of things for social events. This is a time for the delegates to not air grievances, but it's a time to ask very pointed questions that they feel like your people in your precincts would want to know. I'm going to ask everybody to be very civil. This is not where we debate. This is not a debate. And so we're going to field questions by you clicking on the very bottom. There's a Q&A. You click on that, type in your question right there, and we will field through those questions. And then Gary will tell you what the questions are because he's going to be going through those. So I'd like to welcome Phil Lyman, a friend of mine and candidate here for CD3. Another friend of mine, Celeste Myers. They're just both wonderful people. We appreciate her.
Celeste Maloy.
What did I say?
Myers are another county. Another county.
I was just thinking about Celeste Maloy. Sorry, Celeste. We have a Celeste Myers that helped last night with the thing, and I've been talking with her a bunch. Celeste Maloy. Sorry about that. And then we have somebody running against these two, Tyler Murset. I know his parents here from the Hurricane area, and he's putting an effort in right here too. So we need to really value what he has to say and listen and compare these three different candidates and feel like who best represents our values and our political beliefs of our constituents that elected you guys as delegates. So thank you all for being a part of this. Right now we have 48 people on. So the way we're going to do this is it doesn't matter how we start. I'm just going to start with Tyler and then Celeste and then Phil for the first question. And then we'll rotate through that way. If I mess it up, I probably will, going back and forth on the order. But the first question is going to be Tyler and then Celeste and then Phil. That'll be the very first question, we'll change it from there. So, Gary, do we have any questions so far?
Yes, we do. All right. And the other thing I'm going to do, candidates, is in order for us to really get through all the questions, I'm going to try to keep you limited to about a 2-minute answer. I'm going to try really hard not to be super strict on that, but if you're going long over, then I'm probably going to pull the plug. So, we want to keep it fun. We want to keep it lively. We want to get through as many questions as we can because there is a big backlog. So try to prioritize your answer in a way that gets to the meat of the issue as quickly as you can. So question number 1, Tyler, you're first, just as Willie outlined. And I'll try to summarize because unfortunately sometimes the questions are very lengthy and I'll summarize it down. But in essence, this one is, do you support the elimination of illegal immigration and the importance of a concerted deportation effort to undo the negative economic effects and rising criminal activity?
Just to make sure, I think that they worded that in a way that is a little confusing. I do support President Trump and his immigration efforts to remove people who are not in the country legally. I think it puts a big burden on the United States. I know that there are a lot of people say, well, what about there are different groups of people and different farmers and different constituencies that need these people. Well, we're going to have a real problem with AI here really soon. That it's going to be a wrecking ball to our country in many ways. I think the end will be positive, but we need to have these jobs that will be available for regular Americans. I mean, I don't understand why with the H-1B, I believe is what it's called, bringing in people from overseas who can basically just work for under wages for what our American people can work for. I think that we should prioritize Americans in our job markets. I think that I have nothing against people who are here illegally, nothing against them personally. I don't dislike, or I dislike the idea that they can be on our welfare rolls. I support the efforts by some in the Utah State Legislature to reduce the possibility of illegal immigrants being on the welfare rolls. And so, yes, I do support the deportation efforts by President Trump.
Awesome. Celeste, over to you. Your views on illegal immigration and mass deportation.
Yeah, so I support eliminating illegal immigration. I've voted to fund Border Patrol and ICE and HSI, which is the investigations arm. And you can't be a sovereign nation if you don't have control over who and what is coming over your borders. And you're not a sovereign nation if you can't remove people who weren't supposed to be here in the first place. So not only am I saying I support it, but I've voted to support it.
Awesome. Thank you. Phil, you're up. Your views on illegal immigration and mass deportation.
Yeah, I absolutely support President Trump's mass deportation efforts. I was down to the border a couple of years ago and saw what was happening under the Biden administration, and it was just a free for all. They removed large sections of the wall. People were able to come and go as they pleased. The cartels had some serious business dealings going, and kind of as Tyler said, I'm not opposed to people coming here and working on a work visa. I'm not opposed to seasonal workers, but when you have an avenue for that turns into an avenue for human trafficking and fentanyl and exploitation by the cartels, then it's time to shut that down. And so I hope not only do we shut down illegal immigration and do the mass deportations, but the H-1B visa program needs to be shut down as well until we can figure out a better way to monitor those that are coming in.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Thanks for keeping it short. All of you right away, not going over the 2 minutes. So thank you for doing that. That'll keep this moving right along nice and fast. All right. So the next question, Celeste, you're up first, is why is it that all we hear about is Social Security ending, but SNAP, unemployment, housing, all the other entitlement programs are not?
So I think the reason you probably feel like you're hearing that is because of the way it's structured. So Social Security is supposed to be funded by the withdrawal from people's paychecks, as opposed to SNAP and some of these others that are funded by appropriations from Congress. And so where I am in Congress, we're talking about all of them. The only one we couldn't touch during the reconciliation process was Social Security. And I think the reason it's not included in reconciliation is that same reason, that it's supposed to be self-funding. And so I think the idea was that it wasn't originally considered mandatory spending, because if you have more payers paying in than you have pensioners drawing out, it's supposed to self-fund. It isn't. And we've known for a long time it's needed to be adjusted. But I think that's why when you hear people talk about the entitlement programs or mandatory spending, Social Security is usually handled separately. It's talked about differently because it's funded differently. But the truth is we have to get all of them under control. Most of the spending in Congress now is mandatory spending. It's the non-appropriated funds like Medicare, Medicaid, the welfare programs, Social Security. And we have to have a plan for how we're going to pay for the things that we've committed to pay for, or we have to change the commitments.
Awesome. Thank you. Phil, you're up on your views on Social Security and why they're not grouped in the same way as some of the other entitlements.
Well, yeah, a deal is a deal. And when people are put into a system of putting away for their Social Security benefits in the future, then they're entitled to that payout. The challenge comes that we've overspent the Social Security reserve by trillions and trillions of dollars. The truth is it's bankrupt. So I think everybody's recognizing that at some point we've got to rendezvous with reality. And I think Celeste mentioned it last night. It does kind of resemble a pyramid where those on the bottom are paying for those at the top. And that doesn't usually end well. At some point, people say, this is no longer viable. It's no longer sustainable. There's a lot of things in the national sphere that are in that realm. Social Security definitely is probably one of the highest costs that we're going to have down the future, and there's going to have to be some very creative ways to figure out how to take care of people who have simply don't have the funds. The country doesn't have the funds to do that. So, yeah.
Awesome, thank you. And Tyler?
I support the reform efforts of the SNAP program. I see far too, and please forgive me if I'm wrong. I'm going to make an observation. There's a lot of overweight people using SNAP, and if people are hungry, that's one thing. But if they're just getting, junk food and so on and so forth, I think that there's some opportunities for reform there, and I think that President Trump has made efforts to do that. I think there are so many other areas of concern in the government where we can pare down. I don't think that Social Security is a commitment that we've made to the people. I'm paying in. I actually don't expect to take any out. I'm not going to give it up just voluntarily. If it's there, I'll take it. But we do need to fund those. There are people who depend on that. I have family who depend on it. I have relatives who are handicapped. I don't know if it's in the same program or not, but there are some things that we have made commitments for. We have so many areas of fraud and other concerns that are the low-hanging fruit that we should go after first, and we need to fix those before we even suggest to talk about reforming Social Security.
Awesome, thank you, Tyler. All right, the next question, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit because I think it starts off with not something that's factually correct, but it's asking basically, what would you do? How would you handle working with BLM and the U.S. Forest Service to make sure that they're not mismanaging our federal lands and make sure that they're prioritizing recreational opportunity, access to our lands that have been taken away in recent years? Phil, you're up first.
The 10th Amendment says those powers not delegated to the federal government are reserved to the states. And I don't recall recreation and energy being delegated to the federal government. I always say that when you look at a map and you can see that square state out there in the Midwest, out in the West, it means something. Utah has jurisdiction. My solution to this is not going and asking for permission from the Forest Service and the BLM to do certain things that the state wants to do. It's the state legislature stepping into the space that they were designed to occupy and exercising jurisdiction in that space. And I'm not naive to the current system that's in place and the need for reform in that regard. But it's going to start with the demand from the legislatures. And I would certainly support them as a congressman. I would support them making that demand and occupy that space. When it comes to just recreation and access to the land, absolutely the legislature is in a position to pass bills. I passed bills, saying that it was illegal for the BLM to close a road by dragging debris across it. I passed another bill that said that the state would consider an RS-2477 road open until adjudicated closed, which was the opposite of what they were doing. So lots of things that the legislature can do incrementally, but ultimately they just need to occupy that jurisdictional space that came to them with the grant of statehood.
Awesome. Tyler, your views on BLM and their closing of Utah roads?
I echo what Phil says. I think the states, this is a state steal. In my informal polling of the delegates, I'm trying to gather a list of what's most important to those people, the state delegates, and actually the federal lands and water is leading the charge right now. And so this is an incredibly important issue. And I'm going to be straight up and admit I'm not the most knowledgeable on this. I look for the input from the people to let me know what is most important. I generally, I believe in the constitutional principle of this. Anything that is not specifically for the federal government is left to the states, and so I think that's where this clearly lies. And the state legislatures need to step up and assert their constitutional rights.
Awesome. Thank you. I should have been doing this from the beginning is give credit to the person who submitted the question. That last one was from Andrew Eachel. So thank you for sending that in, Andrew. This question is from our...
Gary, do you want me to answer that
Oh my
question?
gosh, I'm so sorry. I was taking notes on exactly where I left off, and I was so excited to get to the next question. I forgot. Thank you, Celeste, for jumping in. I appreciate it.
No problem. Hey, this is another one of those things where I don't have to tell you what I'm going to do. I can tell you what I've already done. So Congress told the federal land management agencies to manage for multiple use and sustained yield. That means they're not only supposed to be managing for recreation, but also mining and timber and grazing, and all of the multiple uses that happen on our public lands. And there's been a move for the last couple of decades to move to mostly recreation and cutting off a lot of the other uses. I don't know why people consider it noble to recreate on public land, but somehow grubby to make a living out there. But I support people being able to make a living, especially in our rural areas where they're dependent on public land. And so what we've done is make sure that we're using our power in Congress. And one of the is the Congressional Review Act that we passed on the Glen Canyon National Recreation Area. So the plan that the Department of Interior proposed would close a lot of roads. We as Congress passed the bill that I introduced and killed that plan to keep the roads open. We're also working with the Forest Service to make sure that we're bringing back the timber economy in rural Utah, making sure that the small sawmills that want to set up around the state have timber sales that match their market so that they can stay in business and have some certainty. And moving the Forest Service headquarters to Utah is really going to help. When the people who are making the decisions are in Utah, they're going to have a better understanding of how that timber economy impacts Utah. And the same with mining, the same with grazing. And so this is one of our jobs in Congress, is to exercise oversight of those agencies that we created to manage land, to make sure they're managing the land the way we told them to, which is for the benefit of the people. Thanks, Gary.
No, thank you. And again, I apologize. I thank you for your grace on that. And I'm not gonna promise that I'll be mistake free the whole evening. And I appreciate you guys jumping in if I do make a mistake. So thank you. This next question is from Stephen Williams. This is kind of a state's issue, really not federal, but because you all were affected by it, I feel like it's worthwhile to hear your opinion on it. But there's concern, this is basically around, Prop 4 and how it affected this race. And so, what are your views on, what happened with Prop 4 within our state? What out do you see coming through that? How do you see us navigating this within our state? And that will first go to Tyler Murset, please.
Thank you. I disagreed with how the Prop 4 went down. I first wanted to make sure that I was understanding the issue correctly. So I went to the United States Constitution, and it says that the means and times are set by the state legislatures. And so then I went to the Utah Constitution, and it basically accepted that from the United States Constitution. And I don't see anywhere in there where it talks about judges or any other oversight. So for a judge to basically choose a map that the legislature did not choose is outside of the realm of constitutionality to me. Now, it did affect me. Celeste was in the 2nd district and now in the 3rd, and so I don't have anything against the new people in our district. I think they're amazing. But the ways the Constitution was set up, this is a states versus the federal government issue. This is not a checks and balances within the state of Utah issue. This is a check and balance between the state and the federal government, and that was violated. And so I disagree with the way that it was handled. I think that we can potentially, even Prop 4 itself was not implemented in the way that it was presented to the people. And so there were so many different missteps along the way by the legislature kind of fell asleep at the wheel. Also, the state legislature, I think that they didn't go to bat and fight for it as much as they should. And actually laud Celeste for putting in an appeal, even though it was turned down. The whole process was a horror to me, and I disagree with how it was done.
And Celeste, you're up next.
Yeah, I have been on the news a lot talking about this one. I think the way we got this map is an affront to the whole idea of representative government. The Utah Constitution does say in Article 9 that the legislature draws these maps. The court said because Article 6 of the state Constitution says that the people have equal authority with the legislature, that means the legislature can never amend anything that the people put on the ballot. So the Better Boundaries people got this Prop 4 on the ballot. They convinced people that having an independent redistricting commission would make our map drawing more fair. And I don't think most people understood that included a list of criteria they had to meet. The state legislature saw those criteria were a problem and just amended them. And then because of that, the judge threw out our map and said, because the legislature amended the criteria, the maps they drew were a product of that, and the whole thing got thrown out. I think most people think our maps got thrown out because a judge decided they were gerrymandered, and that just isn't true. No one's ever decided on the substance of our map. It's all been processed, and the process has been flawed. And that's why I decided to file a federal lawsuit with Burgess Owens and Commissioners Snow and Iverson and Mayor Hughes. And we had some amazing people who are willing to stand together and take this to federal court and say that because it impacted federal elections, we wanted federal court to say that the state misinterpreted our own Constitution. That's a pretty big step to take and not one that I took lightly. We weren't successful, as Tyler said, and this is the map. But the fact that through some pretty shady means, we got the Prop 4 repeal isn't even going to make it to the ballot tells you that there's some people who feel like they've got a lot to lose. And we're going to have to stay diligent and support the state legislature and whatever they decide to do next, and make sure that we're abiding by the Utah Constitution, which says that the legislature draws maps, because the legislature is accountable to the people and judges and special interest groups are not.
All right. Phil, your views on Prop 4 and how that all went down.
Yeah, so I look at this as a failure on the part of the legislature to really assert their authority in this space. And as Celeste said, the Constitution does say that the people have an equal right in the legislative process. So you've got a judge that's saying, well, the people said this, the legislature is yielding to that judge's order. But more so than that, what I saw happen was before the ink was even dry on that decision, the lieutenant governor's office came out and said, we're going to support the judge on this decision, almost as if it was in line with what the elections office or the lieutenant governor's office was hoping would happen. No pushback, no resistance to that. In the 6 years that I was in the legislature, and I was there in 2020 when we were going through the census process and drawing these districts, and what I saw was again a top-down element from the governor's office down through the legislature, through the speaker, through the president of the Senate, and very little engagement from the actual representatives of the people who should be speaking up and talking about these things. It's like a deference to authority from a top-down source. So it's not surprising to me when there's a reason they call it the uniparty, and that's because you get powerful people in the legislative branch, in the judicial branch, in the executive branch, meeting together in committees, deciding what's going to happen, and then it rolls down through the legislature, and resistance is futile. So this is a symptom of what I would say is a bigger problem in Utah, which comes back to representative form of government, where we're supposed to step forward and represent the people's interest. And I see this as a failure on multiple levels. But at the end of the day, I'm not sure if those who are pushing the better boundaries would see this as a defect. I think it's worked perfectly for the designs that they laid out at the very beginning of this and organized from the top down. And it really bothers me that we sit back and pretend like it's something we are not able to affect.
Thank you, Phil. All right, next question is from Charlotte Stevenson, and her question is, what are the top 3 things that you will fight for from a federal level that helps our state specifically, and maybe even specifically Southern Utah? And Celeste, you're first on that one.
Yeah, I've answered this question a lot of times. I've been consistent that the top three priorities I have are debt and deficit. We've got to tackle those. We've made modest gains this last year. We need to keep going and keep things going in the right direction where we're cutting the deficit and paying off the debt. Regulatory reform, not the sexiest thing, not the most exciting thing you're going to hear about on talk radio all the time, but it impacts everything we do, and especially in a state like Utah where the majority of our land is managed by the federal government. And then have to have a long-term water plan. The state's part, but the federal government is a partner with the state in water infrastructure planning and long-term planning. And a lot of the things we're going to need to do for water long-term are going to have to be interstate efforts. And so then the federal government has a role to play there. And with my background and expertise in water, that's one of the things that I want to really focus on during this next term in Congress.
You're muted, Gary, if you're trying to say something.
Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. Phil, you're up next. Top three things that you'll work on at the federal level to help our state in Southern Utah.
Yeah, thanks. I've said as my campaign slogan, transparency first. And the thing is, you can't fix a problem until you recognize that a problem exists. And so much of what we deal with is kept from the people. They can't see that there's a problem because there is no transparency. And we saw that through the Doge effort. Basically, just telling people what was going on was enough to make massive changes. I watched Nick Shirley go out and hammer on some of the things that are happening around the country. And just one person, one individual telling the truth is bringing down, a whole hierarchy of corruption in Wisconsin and now California. And it's really a beautiful thing to see. So transparency, I think, is a precursor to so many things. I've seen the weaponization of the Department of Justice, the weaponization of the IRS, the weaponization of the Bureau of Land Management. And I know there's been committees formed to fight those things in Washington, D.C. I've been to a number of those hearings, a number of those committees. I was on a committee on the weaponization of the IRS, and it was really eye-opening to me. So when government is taking its bureaucracy and using it to fight political battles and harm people who have ideological differences, that's a real concern to me. It's tyranny. And when I see the same thing happening at the state of Utah, that's a concern to me as well. I guess maybe the third thing I would say is the economy. And I look at the geopolitical, global maneuverings that are going on, the war in Iran and the things that are happening in the Middle East. I don't have the boots on the ground military or political experience to deal with that, but I do have the economic ability to see what's going on. I think it's all driven by economics. And same thing with when we're talking about our national debt. These are things that need a common sense approach and an honest approach to addressing those. So I would say the economy, the weaponization, and transparency.
Awesome. Thank you. And Tyler, you're third on that one.
Yeah, thank you. As many of you know, I'm running on a particular issue or platform, and that is I created a way for the voters of Utah in our district to make their voices be heard. And so to answer because I just got done talking to many people here in Uinta County, and I asked them, do you feel that your voice is being heard? And nearly every person that I talked to said no. There's a disconnect between what they are feeling and what they're seeing between the representatives and the people. And so I'm going to give an objective way for the people to know that their voice is actually heard through a vote, and I'm pledging to vote with the majority there. So to me, the app and the idea is about transparency. It's about the people knowing that objectively I'm representing them. There are also other elements to this idea, which some of them are voter ID. Part of this app that I'm developing is that we're going to show that only people who are voting should be voting. Only the people that are on the voter rolls are voting. We're going to have transparent voter rolls the second issue that I want to focus on is voter ID, the transforming the whole voting process, because to me it's not working. I often ask people, do you know that your vote was counted correctly? Now in Utah we can check that our vote was actually counted, but we don't know that it was put in the right column, and we don't know that it was added to or subtracted from. We don't know those things. And so we need to have a way where we can have our votes, we can know and track our votes. And so to me, showing that I can represent the people, voter ID, and the other thing that I would really focus on right now, we have a coming kind of wrecking ball with AI, which is going to affect pretty much every job in the state in one way or another. And I think long term we will be okay, but in the short term it's going to be painful. And so we need to reduce the regulations that make so many of the things that we buy expensive. And so I would work on regulatory reform, identifying the key issues in each of the main areas of our economy that are causing high prices. And so those are the three things that I would work on.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So this next question is from Nicole Mowry, and she wants to have a little discussion or get your thoughts on cloud seeding. Sometimes this is viewed as a state's issue. We know that there are some states that have outlawed cloud seeding, not yet here in Utah. But what can be done at a federal level? Because maybe the things that the states are doing isn't as effective as it should be because of federal regulations over the sky. So, and if you guys don't know, like cloud seeding is happening here, and we know that from our own state legislature. So, what are your thoughts about how to protect our skies, our water, and ultimately everything that affects us? Phil goes first on that one.
Thanks. And cloud seeding takes on a lot of different issues and things. There's the cloud seeding that's trying to create more rainfall, but there's other things about the chemtrails, the chemicals that are being sprayed. And I don't think it's too much to ask for a law that bans spraying poison across the United States onto the population and onto the people, onto the rivers and the streams. And I think that's what's happening. I really do believe that there's a lot of that's going on. So to pass a law federally that says we don't allow people to use airborne sprays from airplanes that are damaging to the people. Number one, if that's not happening, if they're not doing those things, then there's no opposition to that bill. And if they are doing those things, then hopefully it stops, and we see a restoration of the fish and the vegetation and the wildlife that are and the people that are being affected by those things. So I'm a huge proponent, even though I'm not an expert on the chemtrails that we see. I truly am not an expert on that, but I do see unexplained negative effects happening in the country, and there's nothing wrong with passing a law that says it's illegal to spray poison across our nation.
Tyler, you're up next. Thank you, Phil.
Well, this is an interesting topic because I've heard, I know a little bit about chemtrails. I know a little bit about cloud seeding. I don't know a lot about either of them. However, I was in Kane County a few days ago, and multiple people came up to me with this concern about chemtrails and the cloud seeding. Now, the cloud seeders swear that it is safe, and I'm not sure. I'm hesitant to just believe the people who are actually, selling the product. They're hacking their own wares, and so I'm not sure about that. What I am concerned about is the people not having an input on that. We should know exactly what is happening, and if the cloud seeding truly is safe, let's see the studies on it. Let's get the scientists involved, and let's be transparent about it. What I don't agree with also, Bill Gates has been talking about doing a mist and blocking out the sun. That's ridiculous. There's in no world should Bill Gates have any sort of power to do that. And we need to do everything we can to stop that for sure. Chemtrails for sure. Cloud seeding is an issue I need to study up on some more. I have seen in Texas that they've kind of had some runaways. I saw that they had some people blamed some of the large floods that took that girls' camp out that was potentially caused by cloud seeding. So it's not all just positive. There can be some definite downsides to cloud seeding, and some of those include, just covering the whole ground with things that may not be beneficial to the wildlife, to plants and to people. And so we need some transparency there. I don't want to say I would outright ban cloud seeding, but I need more information there.
All right, Celeste, your views on cloud seeding and what we can do at a federal level.
Yeah. So this is a great federalism question. The state of Utah has been doing cloud seeding, and essentially they're fall down to the ground. And they've worked with companies that have been transparent with the state about what's in those dust particles and what is dropping to the ground. And I support the state's ability to be able to look into this and decide if it's good for the people of Utah and try it. And if the people of Utah disagree and would rather take a risk on whether it rains than have the state putting dust particles in the clouds, it's easier for the people on this call to go talk to their state legislators and say, I'm concerned about cloud seeding, and ask for the data and ask for the science and get those answers than it is from the federal government. So this is one where I think the federal government should let the states make that decision. As far as spraying harmful chemicals into the air, this is why I talk about regulatory reform and not just getting rid of all regulations. So some of my colleagues would like to wipe out all regulations and start over with nothing. And then if we need it, we can put it back into place. And while I get the logic, there are some things that are already regulated that need to be regulated, like whether somebody can put toxins into our air and our water. And so we need to make sure that those regulations are being followed. And if anybody is, through airplanes, putting toxic chemicals into the air, it's already illegal and we have to be enforcing it. And so, when we have these conversations, it's always important that we make sure we know which level of government has the regulation and the jurisdiction over it, and that level of government is holding people accountable. So when it comes to cloud seeding, I support the state's ability to do the research and be transparent with the people of Utah and explain why they're trying to make sure we get more rain in Utah. And then when it comes to anything being sprayed out of an airplane, federal government does have jurisdiction over that, and it is being regulated, and we need to make sure those regulations are being properly enforced so that people can be secure that they are breathing clean air and drinking clean water.
All right, thank you, Celeste. Next question we'll take is from Brian Traub, and the first is Tyler Murset coming up on this one. Congress has not addressed immigration reform. So this is immigration reform, so a little bit different than illegal immigration. Congress has not addressed immigration reform for decades. What do you believe is a long-range solution you would advocate in Congress?
Basically, is the question, are we going to grant people who have been here their whole lives, and maybe they were born as a baby in Mexico, but they were brought over the border, immediately after they were born, so they're technically not a citizen, they're a legal alien. That's a good question. There's I tend to think that they need to go back and file the forms the right way and come in the right way, regardless of the situation. I think that there we can make some provisions with the people in cases like that maybe they don't get certain rights or things that welfare or other types of things that
Tyler,
may be a condition.
Tyler, I'm sorry. Can I interrupt you here really quick? Because I see you going down the path of addressing illegal immigration, and this one is specifically just talking about immigration reform. So I think it's maybe more along the lines of, should we increase the number of legal immigrants coming through? Like, we're already at about a million a year. It's the most generous country in the world in terms of number of people coming into the country. Maybe this is about H-1B visas. So the legal pathways, if you can talk about legislation around the legal pathways.
If we're talking about the legal pathways, especially the H-1B, I've seen, because I've recently become involved in the technology scene. I just see a slew of people getting laid off and then replaced. These same companies who laid off thousands and thousands of people immediately are applying for these H-1B visas to get people back in those same spots for half the pay. And so in that type of instance, I don't think that I think we can put a pause on the H-1B visas and other similar visas. The question that many people say is, well, we need to bring in the top talent from these other countries, and I don't disagree with that argument to a degree, but the evidence that I'm seeing is that that's not happening. They're bringing in people who are taking advantage of the system. There are lawyers set up to totally game the system to make it so that they can have kind of a chain migration thing where, yes, you have one person who has a visa, they bring their whole family, and then they just end up staying. And so I think we need to put a pause on the program, on any of those type of programs, and we need to prioritize citizens of the United States.
Awesome. Thank you, Tyler. And Celeste, you're up next. So H-1B visas, H-2A visas, legal pathways. What are your views on addressing legal immigration reform?
Sorry, my battery got low and I had to plug it in, and now it's sideways. It's hard to unmute. What I'm planning to do in Congress is work with my colleagues on making sure that we have the right incentives. So 40 years ago in the Reagan administration, I think out of an abundance of compassion, we decided to, grant a pathway for citizenship to people who are already here, clean the slate, and enforce moving forward. And here we are 40 years later with an even bigger problem. And so whatever we do, it has to create the right incentives. We created incentives during the Biden administration for people to come across the border illegally because it was easy and there were no consequences. So we have to come up with a legal immigration plan that makes it so that people who do want to come here for a better life, do want to have a job and contribute, have the right incentives to do it the right way. And for the people that are already here, we have to create some sort of incentive for them to go back out and come in the front door through the right way. And so I don't know what all of the details of that are going to look like yet, but I know that whatever we do, it's got to remove the incentive to just get here by any means, and then feel like once you're here, they'll figure it out, but we're going to be all right.
And Phil, you're up next on the legal pathways and reforms that you'd look at.
Thanks, Gary. I think America should be more exclusive. It is not an open border. We are a country. We are a nation. We have a border, and it's interesting too in the global scene how businesses are more. It's much easier to do business globally. The fact that people want to live in America doesn't mean that they just can come and move to America. I'm an America first person. I believe that we owe it to our next generation, to our children, to our grandchildren, to preserve what is uniquely American. And those that are willing to, go through the high, go over that high bar of obtaining U.S. citizenship, it should be a high bar, and they should want to be here, and it should be something that that is not easily obtained.
Thank you. All right, the next question, Celeste is going to be going first for. There's been a couple of them that are revolving around Social Security, and I know that we touched on it a little bit, but I'll try to focus it on a new area. This one question, if you can touch on. Obviously it says, we know Social Security money comes from money paid into by workers. Are those funds also given out to those on SSI who did not pay in? Or does that money, does that Social Security funds come from somewhere else? And similarly, do you support any sort of caps or phase out for Social Security? I mean, like Bill Gates' name was mentioned a moment ago. Should Bill Gates be allowed to file for Social Security? Celeste, you were up first on that one.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, as far as I know, in order to be eligible for Social Security, you have to have been paying in. So I know women who have been stay-at-home moms, and so they weren't paying into Social Security, and now they are not eligible to withdraw from Social Security. But yes, the idea has been thrown around, should there be some sort of means test or some sort of, graduated levels, where if you have more money than the state of Utah in your savings account, should you really be drawing out Social Security? And the argument against that is that people who pay into Social Security were made a promise that this was something that was being withdrawn for them in the future. And so I'm open to the idea, but anything we're talking about doing legislatively, you always have to ask this question: is there a majority coalition we can get behind it? And if the idea that I paid into Social Security and so I should be able to draw out is persuasive to enough people, it's tough to get that into a bill because then you can't get a majority coalition. And so it's something I'm open to, but I don't know if it's passable. But I do like the idea of looking at what are the promises of Social Security and what would it take for us to actually be able to live up to those promises. And if it means, we have to invest the fund differently, if it means we have to, change the retirement age gradually over time, if we have to change the way people draw it out, I'm open to just about any suggestion right now if there's proof that it will help solve the problem and that we can get a majority coalition.
All right, thank you. And Phil, you're up next on that one.
Yeah, I don't support a means test for the payout of Social Security. If there's going to be a cut in Social Security, it needs to be a cut to the program that is across the board. And as soon as you start trying to say, well, what's fair this way or what's fair that way, I think you run into a redistribution issue. And in my mind, it's not appropriate in the discussion about Social Security. It might be appropriate in other areas. There might be ways to offset that effect, for low-income people, but not the Social Security. I'm not in favor of a means test at all.
Thank you. And Tyler.
So the original question was a mix of Social Security and SSI benefits, and if I'm not mistaken, SSI is a disability benefit. Am I correct? That so this is one of the few areas of welfare that I do support. I have my wife's uncle is he's disabled, and so they wouldn't be able to care for themselves if he didn't have that. Like I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of pressures from every angle in the government. We have so much fraud and waste that I would hesitate to suggest that we do means testing. Now, anything will be on the table sooner or later. I think if the trajectory that we're continuing on remains, and so I don't want to sugarcoat anything. I would hesitate to. Social Security would be the last thing that I would touch. Let's just say that.
All right, thanks. I'll just chime in. I do not have Bill Gates level money, but I would be willing to forego my Social Security if it kept Social Security from becoming insolvent. All right, so next up for the next question, Phil, you're first, and let's talk about our voting process a little bit. This one's from Ron Sanders, and it says, "What are you going to do to reinstate confidence in our voting process?" Phil, you're up first.
Thank you. And I guess before I say that, Gary, if you wanted to forego your Social Security, you should certainly have the ability to do that. I don't oppose that at all. How do we restore confidence in the voting process? It's so blatantly simple, and we restore transparency, and we have clean voter rolls that can be verified by qualified independent third parties. We have elections that are done in person at the precinct level, cast and counted at the precinct level with the voter ID. Almost every issue that we've got in our elections right now is a design feature to obfuscate the actual vote and the actual election, and we could fix that. We could fix that very quickly. I would rather see people who can just examine the underlying records. And I guess what I'm getting at is this is the fight that I've been fighting in the legislature for a very long time, trying to get just a qualified independent third-party assurance service to come in and say, yeah, we've looked at the voter rolls and they're clean. We've looked at the cast vote records and they're clean. To do a risk limiting audit before an election is certified. And we don't have any of that. And like I say, it's not a flaw. It's a feature of those who are trying to hijack and put their thumb on the scale of the election. So we have to stop doing that, and the confidence would return, I think, immediately.
Thank you. And Tyler, you're second.
I think what we lack is the will to do it. I honestly think we know exactly how to do it. We know that we need transparent voter rolls. We know that we need, I disagree with the mail-in voting system. There's too many opportunities there. I can't track my vote. I can't track exactly how it is, but what it comes down to is we lack the will of coming together as Republicans and pushing it and getting it done and pushing that across the finish line. There's no other thing that's holding us back. It's right there for the taking. We just have to come together. We have to make our voices be heard, and we have to push the legislature to get it done. Now, we can work on a state level. Of course, Mike Lee is working on the SAVE Act. We can support him there. Um, there are just so many things that we can do, but it just comes down to a matter of will. I'm trying to show different components in my app on how we can have a transparent voter roll but maintain our privacy, how we can have a voting, the actual vote that is public but anonymized so that people can track their vote. There are so many different things, off-the-shelf technology that we can use and actual just people verifying people. I mean, it isn't the actual nuts and bolts of it is not hard. What is hard is getting the will to do it.
Thank you, Celeste.
Well, once again, I'll tell you what I've already done on this. I voted for the SAVE Act and for the Save America Act, both of which have passed the House. When I get asked about this, I always tell people that we have to make sure that our elections are secure and that the American people believe that our elections are secure. So we also have a responsibility to be out talking to people about the safeguards we are putting in place. Because if people don't believe that their vote is going to be fairly counted, we run the risk that people will just opt out, and that we'll get a nihilistic attitude towards participation in government, and that would be the downfall of our system of government. And so we have to make sure we have good laws and good policy in place. We also have to be willing to go out and talk to people about what we're doing to make sure that these elections are secure, that their votes are being fairly counted, so that they'll keep showing up and voting and keep believing that the people who are elected are fairly elected, so that they can believe in our system of government. All of the federalism and the checks and balances, none of that matters if people don't believe that the people who are elected were fairly elected. So I think we've got responsibilities on both sides for the legislating and also for messaging.
Awesome, thank you. Tyler, you're up first for this one. Kind of staying on the election process a little bit. Are you for or against candidates collecting signatures, and why?
Well, I actually ran 2 years ago, and as an unaffiliated candidate, and I got on the ballot by collecting signatures. Now, I didn't bypass any convention or any caucuses to do that. That was something that was allowed by the state legislature. So I was actually on the ballot. I've gathered signatures. This round I've decided not to gather signatures. The principle that I would like to bring into play here is a political party is a private organization that should be able to choose their candidate in the way that they desire or deem is in their rules. I don't think that the state legislature had the authority. Obviously, in retrospect, they're doing it with the SB 54. I don't think that they have the authority to dictate what a private organization does to nominate their people. So, as a principle, the parties should be able to choose who they desire to be their candidate, and think that we should repeal SB 54.
Thank you, Tyler. Celeste, you're up on signature gathering.
Yeah, I did gather signatures this time. It's the third election cycle I've done. It's the first time I've ever done signatures. I wish it wasn't one of the things that was part of our process. I'm a big fan of the caucus convention system. I won through a convention process. I never could have run through a primary process. When I ran for re-election, I didn't gather any signatures. And I've told this story a couple of times, but I think it bears repeating. I stood last cycle in the Washington City Library in a room with about 200 state delegates from Washington County and listened to my opponent say that he owed it to the delegates to gather signatures because he owed it to them to use every tool at his disposal to get on the ballot. And that room cheered. A room full of delegates cheered for somebody saying he owed it to them to get signatures. And then Washington County delegates backed my opponent at the convention. So I learned a lesson from that, and I'm gathering signatures this time because I've got to use all the tools that are available to me. But I'm also running like everything depends on convention because I think that's the way it should be. And so I have spent my time meeting with delegates, calling delegates, doing virtual town halls with delegates, and making sure that delegates are getting as many opportunities as possible to ask me questions and vet me, because that's the point of having delegates and having a system where I am standing in front of people who represent their neighborhoods and they can vet me for their neighbors.
Thank you, Phil. You're last on that one.
Yeah, I'm absolutely opposed to the dual system, to the dual path. And it could be fixed. This is the issue. Is it could be fixed. The GOP could fix it. The legislature could fix it. It's not fair to throw out a dual path option to candidates and then say you're going to get condemned if you do the one or the other. And for me, the signature path this time is really asking the question of the party leadership: do you support caucus winners or do you support signature gatherers? Because the GOP has not taken a position on this. They don't step in, and again to put it on the candidates. And I didn't say that I owe it to the delegates to gather signatures. I say I owe it to my constituents to run an honest race. And if there's two options that are given, and I say I'm going to throw away an option, am I a serious candidate? And that was the position that I had before. This go around is a very different race, and my participation in the signature path was to challenge the GOP as: do you support a caucus only candidate? Do you support a signature candidate? Because I've been both, and I'm disappointed that the party leaves that question unanswered, and then I'm even more disappointed that they come out with kind of harsh condemnation of a person who is forced into that position of that dual path, and saying I have to choose one or the other, and if I choose the wrong one, I'm going to be in trouble with delegates. So and similar to Celeste, I'm a convention candidate. That's where I go. That's who I won 68% at convention a couple of years ago, and I put all of my eggs in the hands of the delegates. But I didn't create the dual path system, and I wish they would get rid of it.
Awesome.
Sorry, Gary, I just want to clarify really quickly. When I tell that story and say my opponent said this last round, I mean the person who was my opponent last round. It wasn't Phil Lyman who said that.
Oh, thanks. Sorry, Celeste.
All right, thank you. And that last question, thank you for sending that in, was from Krista Baker. This next question, Celeste, since you're up first, it is kind of talking about one of your votes. And I'm taking the question's word for it that you voted this way. You can certainly clarify if that was incorrect. But this question is about the kill switch in cars. Apparently you voted for that. So if you can let us know why you did that. And then for the other candidates, they'll just chime in on what they would have done differently if they would have. Kill switch in cars. Celeste, you're first.
Yeah, thank you for this question. I'm always happy to address this one because there's a lot of misinformation out there. So in the appropriations bill, there was an amendment offered on the floor to pull out a study of how to prevent drunk driving deaths. In fact, the language specifically said passive means of preventing drunk driving deaths. One of my colleagues offered an amendment to pull that out and said the reason he wanted to pull it out is because if they studied how to prevent drunk driving deaths, they would probably recommend a kill switch. And if a kill switch was the recommendation, then the government would probably have access to it and could kill our cars remotely. I opted not to vote for the amendment. I'm willing to fund a study of how to prevent drunk driving deaths, particularly when it says passive means. But 1 week later, I was in a meeting with Western Caucus and the head of the National Transportation Highway Safety Administration, who's doing the study. And I told him I voted to keep the study in the appropriations bill, but if the study comes back and recommends kill switches, just know I will never fund kill switches in cars. And he assured me that that is not even on the table because the language says passive means and a kill switch is an active means. So thank you for asking that question, so I have a chance to clarify.
Phil, your thoughts on kill switches in cars?
I mean, anything you give the government is going to be used against the people. So, we talk about the kill switch on cars or the surveillance or anything else. And the answer is no, 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 no. I don't want that power put in the hands of government to decide if there's going to be a kill switch on cars. That's saying I'm not condemning anybody for their logic or their approach, to a serious problem, but a kill switch on the car is I would never support that.
And Tyler.
I don't support a kill switch on cars either. I think I enjoy riding my carbureted engine machines, and I keep one running just in case of some sort of EMP attack. And I'm not really joking on that. I believe that something may happen. We become too dependent on technology, and sometimes that takes us away from our real lives and what is important. And so technology is coming one way or another, but I think we can make some important lines in the sand with what the government should and shouldn't allow. Some of the car makers are going beyond their bounds, actually, and some of them are making it so to even use their car, it's going to be a subscription. Now, that may be a free market issue, but there's some important lines in the sand that we do need to draw, and the kill switch is one, and that's something that I would not support.
Yeah, that's funny. I heard about a car manufacturer using heated seats as a subscription feature, and I thought that is just insane. All right, so next question, Phil Lyman, you'll go first. This is about the, thank you for Victoria Golf for sending this in. Question about how the U.S. handled the removal of the Venezuelan president, and then maybe take that as a example and how to touch on other foreign affairs.
Well, first of all, I have to say it was very admirable that President Trump could execute the extraction of the president of Venezuela and his wife so cleanly, without violence, without death, and basically remove a tyrant from Venezuela. And I have friends from Venezuela who have fled that country to America, and they were so thrilled that Maduro was removed like that. So from my standpoint, it was admirable. I'm nervous about unilateral ability to declare war, to take military action without any restraint. And if Congress in general were more functional, I would probably be wanting to have them have more of a say in that. The truth is, in Congress, you got many people who hate America, who want to see America destroyed, and to put that back to a congressional vote, anything outside what is currently in the Constitution, which does allow a preemptive or a defensive use of the military on the part of the president. I support that provision, and I do support what I saw President Trump do. As I watch our military and the technology that they have and the abilities that they have, I believe in strength in peace through strength, both military and economic.
Can you go one step further and talk about foreign aid to support foreign wars? I think this question means something specifically around, like maybe an example might be the Ukrainian war, where that we're not involved in it, but we're sending aid or money to facilitate a war.
Again, I think you have to look at these things pragmatically and realistically. If there are things happening worldwide that are going to affect the well-being of the United States, then it is perfectly within the bounds of the Constitution and in the interests of America to engage in those things. So I can't say, blanketly about what's happening with Ukraine. I don't know the details of that. What's happening in Iran, I don't know all the details of that, but I do support the United States being proactive. And I think it is, again, I think it is admirable that we have a commander in chief right now that is willing to do really audacious and really bold things. And I do support him.
All right, thanks. And Tyler, you're up next on foreign issues, Venezuela, extracting a foreign president and funding foreign wars.
the extraction was incredibly impressive. I've learned to give Trump some latitude when it comes to foreign relations. He often makes moves that do not seem logical at first, but in the end turn around to be okay and actually benefit the United States. A question about how we are able to, first of all, fund other wars. Our days as the reserve currency, as the dollar being the reserve currency, are numbered, and that the reserve currency, when they settle oil and other means in dollars, we have an incredible advantage in that, and we're able to borrow against. Um, we're able to get loans that we wouldn't be able to otherwise, and so ultimately that's going to come to an end, and it may put an end to our ability to fund these other wars. I think there was so much fraud in Ukraine that I didn't support the continued effort there. It just seemed like they were taking the Ukrainians were the people in power in Ukraine were taking advantage of those funds, using them for things that were not related to the war efforts. And so whenever I see that, I disagree with kind of the way that those funds were spent. And so we have to take a look at why we were able to fund these things and how those things are going to wind down in the future, because we're not going to be able to be the world police forever.
And Celeste, you're up on foreign wars and the extraction.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, what the United States military pulled off in Venezuela was amazing. And one of the reasons we should remember that is because over the last decade or so, and especially since the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, um, some of our foreign adversaries have started to sneer a little bit at the United States military and maybe imply that we're not what we used to be. And I don't think they're saying that right now. What we pulled off in Venezuela was very complicated, took a lot of intricate planning and people working together seamlessly and some really great intel. And I think if you are President Xi in China or Kim Jong-un or even President Putin, you're making a very different calculation in your head of what the US military is capable of. And I agree, we have to have peace through strength. And that was an incredible demonstration of the strength that our military still has and the abilities that we still have. As far as funding for foreign wars goes, I mean, 2 years ago, I voted against the Ukraine military supplemental funding package. I also felt like their government wasn't transparent enough and they weren't giving us enough answers about what they were doing with the money we'd already sent them, and I didn't want to send them anymore. And because of that, I got invited to go to Ukraine, and I went and saw a lot of the damage on the ground and things that were happening, and that was all educational. But the reason I was there was to find out how they're accounting for the dollars we sent them. And I saw, State Department auditors on the ground in Ukraine triple auditing everything we were sending them, and that did make me feel a lot better about the resources that we've invested. With the Budapest Agreement, we told Ukraine if they didn't develop nukes, that we would make sure that Russia didn't take them over. And Justice Black, in one of the famous Indian law cases, says great nations, like great men, should keep their word. And I do think that matters, that our world partners need to be able to trust us. But we've got to make sure that we're spending money in places that keep Americans safer. And I felt better that we were doing that after I'd seen that. And also the kind of military might we have displayed on the world stage in the last few months, I think saves us a lot of investment in other countries when our adversaries on the world stage can see that we still have the best military might in the world.
All right, thank you. Let's jump to Tyler. You're first on this one. Let's jump to water a little bit. The specific questions from Kathy Ott, and she's asking that she's very concerned about the shrinking of Lake Powell and the Colorado River water generally. What can you guys do at a federal level to help the water situation here specifically in southern Utah? Tyler, you're first.
I don't know. I mean, we have to conserve the water. I don't know that we can produce more. We talked about the cloud seeding. I'm not sure exactly how to go about that. I do know that it is an important issue with the people. I'm not very knowledgeable on this. I know that some of the states are using more than they're allotted. There's a pipeline plan between Lake Powell and southern Utah, which I don't think we should build at this time, even though we may be entitled to that. there's just not enough water to go around, but we need to figure out where it's going and who is actually entitled to that. Are we entitled to it more than are other people taking more than they're allotted? I really don't know. So I would defer to more enlightened people on this issue.
All right, and Celeste, you're up next on water.
Yeah, I mean, storms like the one we got last night help, but I can't take credit for that. I have been working closely with the state and with the Trump administration on what we should be doing for water in the West. Those lakes aren't just recreational; they also produce a lot of our power and the water we need to survive in the West. Before those big dams were there, there were a lot less people in the Western states. The desert is supporting a lot of people it never would have supported without those dams. And so what I'm working on is a 100-year water plan on what do we need for the next 100 years. We've been relying on, the Glen Canyon Dam and the Hoover Dam and Flaming Gorge for 100 years. Now, what do we need for the next 100 years? And I think we need to be investing in a lot of small infrastructure projects. And I think we need to make sure we're investing in things that, like those big dams, the federal government can invest in on the front end, but they have a long-term payoff for the taxpayers. So it's not federal money that just goes out the door. It's federal money that's invested and comes back in the door later, and we have long-term benefits. And so that's what I'm working with my colleagues on the Hill and our state and even the president himself on. The fact that he put $1 billion in the presidential budget for the Great Salt Lake shows that he's pretty plugged into water in Utah and wants to be a resource and wants to help. And I think we should take advantage of that.
Thank you, Phil. Water.
So a few years ago, I formed the North Lake Powell Accord, and I did it when I became a legislator because it was central to the counties that I served. And in one of those meetings, we were talking about the declining levels of Lake Powell, and the Billy Schott, the superintendent of the Glen Canyon Recreation Area, said, "Well, it's complicated." And I said, "Well, I see when I come in, there's water flowing in, and it seems like the water level would be a function of water in minus water out." And he said, "Well, it's actually the lake level is set by the Secretary of Interior." And I said, "Well, it was Sally Jewell at the time. How does she determine that?" So, "Well, she has an advisory board." I said, "Well, who's on the advisory board?" He said, "You may want to look into that." So I did look into it, and it's all the people that want to drain Lake Powell that are on the advisory board. So they can come up with all of the reasons why the lake is going down, but what it comes down to is the Secretary of Interior sets the level of that lake. It's a reservoir. Ultimately it's a river that's flowing through there. We don't produce water from Utah. We either retain it at a certain level or we let that lake drop to a lower level. And that can be out of energy demands. It was like, we've got to keep those turbines turning. We've got obligations downstream, but we don't produce that water that's flowing down the Colorado River. We either retain it or we let it go and see our water levels decline. On the water board for 6 years in the legislature, I watched a constant centralization of water policy, and most of it was driven by big development interests. Salt Lake has what we call extraterritorial water rights that go clear to the border of Wyoming, meaning that if you want to build a cabin somewhere far away from Salt Lake City, you're going to have to negotiate your water rights with Salt Lake City. It's a developer's tool. Water is used to manipulate people. It's used to have control. And that's the part that we've got to get around and say, decentralizing these water decisions, pushing it back to the local communities. The people that are closest to that resource are going to be more affected by those that are far away.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So next, let's touch on healthcare. This particular question is from Bart Combe. And it specifically talks about two kind of edge cases, but just talk about, healthcare in general, if you can address these. But this talks about, that a young person, under the age of 30 can buy, basically catastrophic medical plan only, but yet somebody over 65 still has to pay for health insurance that includes covering for pregnancy. So what type of healthcare reforms would you be looking at representing us in Washington, D.C.? And I apologize. I didn't say Celeste, you're up first on that one. Wait, let me double check. Da-da-da. Yes, that's right. Celeste first.
Okay, so this is a conversation that is happening in real time in Washington, D.C. And I have not taken the lead on this one. I have listened to a lot of my colleagues who've been involved in medical care, including Mike Kennedy in our own delegation, who is a doctor. But Speaker Johnson reminded all of us that when we were trying to repeal and replace Obamacare, we had a medical plan to replace it with. We have good market-driven, conservative, Republican healthcare ideas that we just have to put together and move across the floor. So we are working right now in Congress on putting that together. One of the first things that we're talking about is transparency in pricing and even in services, so that when you are dealing with the healthcare system, you know what you're paying for and you know why. Sometimes we're getting tests or we're doing things just because someone told us to, and we don't really have the ability to ask questions about why it's necessary. Also, some collective bargaining, pooling for small business owners or people who are independent for whatever reason, so that they can get the same benefits as somebody who belongs to a big employer pool. And then some PBM reforms, so we have middlemen in our prescription drug process, and they're making it more expensive. So some overhaul of the PBMs and a combination of other free market, conservative, kind of common sense solutions to some of what's broken with the healthcare system, to bring some relief to people who are, because of Obamacare, being forced into a system that isn't responsive. It's not transparent, and it's not serving the constituents right now. So that's what we're trying to address. And to quote the Speaker of the House, we have binders full of ideas. We have to decide which ones are the best ones and get them moving.
Phil, healthcare, please.
Yeah. The interesting thing with healthcare, and it is happening real time in my office as well. As a CPA, I'm watching people who, no matter what else happens, they have to make sure that they do not make over $84,000, because it will trigger the loss of their Obamacare. And for some of them, that's a $34,000, $35,000 hit. It's a huge disincentive. What I see happening on the positive side of this, especially for people that are maybe in that gap between, they've retired from their job, but they're not quite old enough to qualify for Medicaid, and they've got dividend income, so they go to the marketplace and they end up getting hammered, but is going to these cost sharing communities. They're basically saying we're going to ditch the whole idea of government sponsored health insurance, and we're going to take care of those things through a community. And I really love that idea. Celeste mentioned the PBMs and the middlemen. That's what is driving these high costs. If the insurance companies, the pharmaceutical companies are making billions and billions of dollars. Pfizer, runs an $8 billion a year profit. And it's not because they're such great business people. They have a stranglehold on things. And I don't know that it's Congress's job to remove that. I think it's people's job to say, I'm opting out of that. I'm going to use a cost sharing community approach or something. Doctors that are saying we're not going to do the insurance route anymore. We're gonna do a fee for service, and it's really interesting to see what's happening in the medical field.
And Tyler, healthcare.
There's largely the free market does not largely exist in the healthcare market that I can see. When you have to wait several months to receive your bill to know what you're paying, there's something broken. When the price signal is so obscure from your vision that you don't know forever, the free market can't work. So I would support free market kind of solutions to this, and some of those include getting your own health in order. I went through a health scare myself, and I largely figured out what was going on by going outside of the system. We have to be prepared to not rely on healthcare and health insurance. Of course, there are instances where you get in an accident, things like that. That's what healthcare should be, is when something outside of your control happens. Now, if you're severely overweight and you don't exercise and you don't like that, that's hard for me to get behind. providing healthcare in that situation. When you're unable to take care of your own self, then that is difficult for me. So I support free market innovations. I like the concierge kind of model where people are going to end up going directly to their doctor, get immediate help, and often for a lower cost. And so I support those types of innovations. And of course, we need to get our own health under control.
Thank you. All right, Phil, you'll go first on this question. It is from Andrew Eachel, and he's asking, please discuss how you will bring deficit spending under control. 2 minutes.
I guess deficit spending could be brought under control. The deficit itself, the national debt, is going to be a challenge. But deficit spending, we look at what happened during Doge and the massive amounts of waste, fraud, and abuse, and the people that are becoming billionaires who are connected to the system. That's got to be where we start. And for me, it's transparency, it's full disclosure. It's opening up the books of the federal government to scrutiny, and by that means we are going to see a huge amount of the fraud, waste, and abuse curtailed. Beyond that, the Congress should take seriously the responsibility to balance that budget. And right now, it seems like it's almost a given. We've been gaslit into this notion that it will never occur, and or that it won't happen on an ongoing basis. So I think there's great things that are happening under this administration, and I see some real curbing of those expenditures. And I think we do more of what President Trump and this Congress is doing currently.
Awesome. Thank you. Tyler, you're up next on deficit spending, how to bring it under control.
We've mentioned citizen journalism before. I don't know if in this call or elsewhere, but I found it kind of amusing how quickly some of this fraud just presented itself by someone going and knocking on a door in some of these places in Minnesota, and then in California, and then elsewhere. Citizen journalism is gonna be one of the keys to uncovering some of this waste and spending. Data Republican, some of you follow her. She's actually living in Utah, also been instrumental in exposing some of the connections and the fraud and the waste. There's some really low-hanging fruit that we can go after, and again, it just is going to take a matter of will for our representatives to do something about it. They're addicted to spending. There's very little control, it seems to me, over how they're appropriating the money and doing those things and deciding how and how much things are spent. That the citizen journalism, people opening and inspecting the books, let's outsource some of that. We don't have to rely on government auditors or things like that. Let's open up the books and let everyone check them out. That's what I would say.
Awesome, thank you. And Celeste, this one's for you. No, deficit. Bringing the debt and deficit under control is one of your top 3 things. So I bet you have something very specific to offer on how to bring deficit spending under control.
I do. So the first and easiest thing is we have to pass our appropriations bills. I'm on the appropriations committee. One of the reasons I worked so hard to get on the appropriations committee is because that's where the purse strings are. Only about 26% of our federal spending now is appropriated dollars. 30 years ago, it was the other way around. Only about 26% of it was mandatory spending. So we are going through the 12 appropriations bills individually and cutting things out. I talked last night in the impromptu 2.5-hour debate we had in the basement last night about how the national security bill was a 16% cut year over year. I talked to Chairman Diaz-Balart today on the floor about that, and he said, well, you should be telling people that in the last 3 years, it's a 22% cut, and not a decrease in the projected increase, like year over year cut. And we're doing that at the same time we're investing in our military technology. We have to invest in national security, but we're going through and cutting in the discretionary spending. That's what we appropriate. With the reconciliation package, we also took some cuts out of mandatory spending, which is the part that's really hard to get to. We're planning on doing another reconciliation package, and we just have to keep going. We have to keep finding the waste, fraud, and abuse. Absolutely. We also have to keep finding the things we're funding that just we don't need to be funding, and we have to tighten the belt. We have to be willing to say no to things. From the first time I ran, I said, if we really want to get this done, we're going to have to slaughter some sacred cows, and that's happening. The Department of Education is gone. USAID is gone. And there are some things that have been dramatically reduced, and we just have to keep going and keep reporting back what we're doing. Because again, the American people need to know that it's happening, besides just that we need to be doing it. Because when people know that we're doing it, then they have faith in the system. And sorry, quickly, Gary, housekeeping thing. It is 8:30 and my phone is like 1% battery.
Yes.
Are we, how close are we?
That was the last question. I was just going to say that
Okay.
As a big fan of someone who spends a lot of time in their garage, I cannot let you keep disparaging that garage and calling it a basement. It was a garage. Okay.
Oh, sorry. It was just lower than ground level. That was the...
On the outside, it was at ground level.
Okay. All right.
All right.
It was dry. That was great.
Yes, it was dry. Congresswoman Celeste Maloy, thank you so much for spending this time with our state delegates here in Washington County. Phil Lyman, thank you as well. Tyler Murset, thank you so much. We carried over 50 attendees for the full hour and a half, and get that phone plugged in. Thank you very much. Everybody have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.